what they discovered under the Vatican in 1939, why it was never made public in 1939. While the world was moving toward war, something quiet began beneath the Vatican, not above ground, not in the great halls, not inside the chapels where candles burned and pilgrims whispered prayers, but below, under St. Peter's Basilica, under marble floors worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, under the altar, under the very heart of Catholic power, a small group of workers was given permission to dig beneath the basilica. The official purpose sounded simple enough. Pope Pius XI had died, and there was a wish to prepare a burial place near the traditional tomb of St. Peter. That was the reason on paper. But once the digging began, the men did not simply find empty earth. They found walls, old Roman walls. They found narrow streets buried beneath the church. They found mausoleums, tombs, inscriptions, and sealed chambers, a city of the dead hidden beneath the city of faith. And according to those who studied the excavation later, the deeper they went, the more uncomfortable the questions became, because the Vatican was not built on empty ground. It was built over memory, layer after layer, empire over cemetery, church over empire, stone over bone, faith over something much older. The men who descended in 1939 were not walking into a normal archaeological site. They were stepping into a place where history, religion, politics, and silence had been pressed together for nearly 2,000 years. And the strangest part was not that they found something. The strangest part was how little the world was allowed to see. The Vatican has always understood the power of hidden rooms. Most places hide things because they are afraid. The Vatican hides things because it knows that mystery itself can become authority. A sealed door can be more powerful than an open book. A rumor can travel farther than a document. A missing file can frighten people more than a confession. By 1939, Europe was already shaking. Germany had invaded Poland. The old order was cracking. Governments were preparing for destruction. Families were packing what they could carry. And beneath Rome, under one of the most sacred buildings in the world, men with lamps and tools were opening a forgotten layer of the ancient past. Imagine the sound first. Not music, not bells, only metal against stone, a shovel scraping earth, a hammer striking carefully, a workman breathing through dust. Then the moment when a wall appeared where no wall was supposed to be, a brick line in the darkness, a doorway, a chamber, a human-made space where everyone expected soil. That is the moment when a dig stops being construction. It becomes a question. One of the workers might have held up his lamp and seen painted plaster. Another might have noticed a name carved into stone. Someone would have called for a priest, someone else for an archaeologist. The Vatican had expected a burial project. What it found was a buried world. Under St. Peter's Basilica lay a Roman necropolis, an ancient cemetery that had been covered over when the first great basilica was built in the age of Constantine. That much is known, that much can be said, but every known fact in this story opens a darker door. Because if there were pagan tombs below the basilica, if there were Roman burial chambers, if there were inscriptions, bones, symbols, and sealed spaces, then what exactly was found first? And what was quietly removed before the official story was shaped? The official version is careful. It speaks of archaeology. It speaks of sacred tradition. It speaks of the search for the tomb of St. Peter. But old places rarely give up clean stories. They give fragments, a bone, a mark on a wall, a name scratched into plaster, a box hidden in a recess, a chamber sealed long after everyone who understood it was dead. And in the Vatican, fragments are never just fragments. They become evidence. Or they become problems. There is one detail that makes the whole story feel different. The excavation did not begin in a peaceful century. It began in 1939, a year of fear, a year of secrets, a year when governments were hiding gold, burning papers, moving archives, and preparing for invasion. In that kind of world, information was not neutral. A document could become a weapon. A relic could become a claim. A discovery beneath the Vatican could change not only history, but authority. That is what gives this story its weight. Not the dust, not the bones, the timing. If the same discovery had happened in a quiet century, perhaps the world would have seen every chamber, every object, every report. But in 1939, the Vatican had every reason to be careful, and maybe every reason to be afraid. The first men who entered those spaces were walking below a basilica that millions believed stood above the burial place of St. Peter. That belief mattered. It still matters. The entire spiritual geography of Rome bends around that tradition. If the excavation confirmed it, the church gained something powerful. If it complicated it, the church had a problem. If it contradicted it, the consequences could have been enormous. That does not mean there was a grand conspiracy. Sometimes institutions do not need a conspiracy. They only need caution. They only need locked cabinets. They only need a few men deciding that the public is not ready. And the Vatican has had centuries to perfect caution. Picture the chamber, not as a movie scene. No golden light, no dramatic music. Just a low Roman tomb under the earth, the air thick and still, the walls stained by time. A lamp passes over old brick, then over a painted surface, then over a small recess cut into the wall. Inside it, something is wrapped, not large, not spectacular. That is usually how history appears. Small enough to fit in two hands, large enough to disturb everything. Maybe it was a container, maybe a fragment of bone, maybe an inscription, maybe a text too damaged to read cleanly. Maybe nothing more than an object placed there by someone who believed it mattered. The power of the Vatican story is not that we know every detail, it is that we do not. The records that reached the public were controlled, the interpretations were controlled, the access was controlled, the site itself was controlled. And when the institution that owns the ground also owns the archive, the question becomes unavoidable. What was left out? There are discoveries that make headlines, and there are discoveries that are absorbed. The Vatican does not need to deny everything. It can simply move slowly. It can study, it can classify, it can translate, it can appoint a commission, it can wait, and after enough time passes, the public forgets the first shock. The discovery becomes a footnote. The footnote becomes a tour. The tour becomes a controlled path beneath the basilica, where visitors are shown what can be shown, told what can be told, and guided past the rest. That is how mystery survives inside official history, not always through lies, sometimes through arrangement. The Vatican necropolis is real. The excavations are real. The tombs are real. The ancient Roman world beneath the basilica is real. But the emotional question remains. What did the first digger see before the story became organized? There are moments in archaeology when the first witness knows more than the final report. A worker sees an object before it is cleaned. A priest sees a mark before it is explained. An official sees a document before it is translated. Then the experts arrive. The language changes. The mystery becomes technical. The danger becomes academic. And the public is told only the final sentence. But the first moment is different. The first moment has fear in it. In 1939, that fear would have been sharp. The men digging below St. Peter's were not only digging into Roman soil. They were digging toward the oldest question in Christian Rome. Was Peter really there? Was the basilica built over memory or over proof? And if proof existed, who had the right to define it? The answer was never going to belong only to archaeologists. It belonged to the church. That alone changes the nature of the discovery. Because in a normal excavation, the ground is studied. At the Vatican, the ground is interpreted. A bone is not just a bone. A wall is not just a wall. A name is not just a name. Everything carries theological weight. Everything has consequences. And that may explain why the story never became fully public in the way people expect. There was too much at stake, too much meaning packed into too little space. Under the basilica, the workers found the remains of an ancient cemetery. But to millions, they may also have been standing near the bones of the apostle, who became the foundation stone of the church. That is not a normal discovery. That is a spiritual earthquake. Now imagine a sealed chamber off the main path. Not the famous area, not the place shown later. A smaller space, something overlooked. The kind of room that exists in old structures because builders changed their plans, walls were added, entrances were blocked, and generations forgot what came before. Inside, there are signs of both worlds, Roman and Christian, pagan and sacred, old burial customs, and early symbols of faith, not cleanly separated, not arranged for modern belief, mixed together. That is exactly the kind of discovery that unsettles people. Because modern minds like clear categories. This is pagan, this is Christian, this is empire, this is church, this is history, this is faith. But underground, history does not respect clean borders. It overlaps, it borrows, it hides, it survives inside the thing that replaced it. The Vatican sits on top of that overlap. And in 1939, the ground reminded them, this is where the real tension begins. What if the discovery beneath the Vatican did not destroy the official story, but made it more complicated? What if the earliest Christian memory in Rome was tangled with Roman burial practice, political symbolism, and imperial construction? What if the sacred site was not a single pure line from Peter to Constantine to the modern church? What if it was a maze of devotion, power, memory, and decisions made by men long after the original witnesses were gone? That kind of truth is not easy to put in a headline. It is too subtle for believers who want certainty, too sacred for skeptics who want scandal, too dangerous for institutions that prefer control. So it becomes quiet, not denied, not announced with full force. Quiet. The excavation continued, reports were prepared, scholars debated, popes made statements. Visitors eventually descended into selected parts of the necropolis. But the original feeling of 1939 remained buried with the dust, and perhaps that is the real story. Not that the Vatican found one impossible object and hid it from the world. That is the easy version. The deeper version is more human. They found a past that could not be reduced to a simple sentence. They found Rome before the church. They found death beneath worship. They found empire beneath altar. They found evidence that the most powerful religious site in the West was built not over emptiness, but over layers of contested memory. And when institutions meet complicated truth, they rarely throw open the doors, they manage it. They shape it, they decide what the public can carry. There is a phrase often used about the Vatican archives, secret. But in Latin, the word once meant private, personal, belonging to the office. That distinction matters. That distinction because the Vatican's greatest power has often come not from hiding everything, but from deciding who gets to see what and when. The excavation under St. Peter's followed that same logic. Access was limited. Interpretation was narrow. The story was sacred before it was public. This is why the year 1939 still feels important. The world above was entering one of the darkest periods in modern history. Periods. And below the Vatican, another darkness was being opened by hand. Not a darkness of evil, a darkness of age, the darkness that gathers around things buried too long. Every shovel of soil raised the same silent question. What is faith built on? Stone, bones, tradition, documents, memory. Memory, or the need to believe that beneath all the marble, something original is still there. That question is more powerful than any treasure. It is why people still search for hidden rooms, why they still talk about secret archives, why they still wonder what the Vatican keeps behind closed doors. Because the Vatican is not only a place, it is a symbol of withheld knowledge, a place where the past feels close enough to touch, but never fully available. And that is what makes this story so hard to leave alone. In 1939, they went looking for a burial place. They uncovered a necropolis. They opened a path into the ancient Roman dead. They moved closer to the traditional tomb of St. Peter. And somewhere in that process, the story passed from discovery into control. Maybe nothing scandalous was hidden. Maybe the sealed chambers held only bones, broken inscriptions, and the ordinary sadness of the dead. But even that would be enough, because beneath the Vatican, ordinary things become extraordinary. A name on a wall can become a claim. A small container can become a relic. A missing report can become a legend. A locked door can become a century of suspicion. The truth may not be a single forbidden document. It may be the shape of the place itself. A church built above a cemetery, a faith built above an empire, a public religion built above private rooms. And in 1939, when the first workers broke through the old ground, they did more than uncover tombs. They exposed the structure of history, not clean, not simple, not fully public, layered, guarded, and still unfinished. That is why the discovery was never truly made public in the way people imagine. Because some discoveries cannot be released all at once. They have to be filtered through fear, doctrine, scholarship, and time. They have to be made safe. They have to be given a frame. And once the frame is built, most people stop asking what was outside it. But the question remains, what did they see in those first days beneath St. Peter's? Before the reports, before the official language, before the path was cleaned and measured, before the story became acceptable, what did the first lamp reveal in the dust? A wall, a name, a bone, a sealed recess, or just enough evidence to remind the Vatican that even the most powerful institution on earth is standing on something older than itself. Maybe that was the discovery, not a treasure, not a weapon, not a secret gospel, but a buried truth that no institution likes to face. The ground remembers everything. Even when men build marble over it, even when priests bless it, even when centuries pass, even when archives close, the ground waits. And in 1939, beneath the Vatican, it began to speak.